You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hey everybody, happiest of Wednesdays to you. It is TV Guidance Counselor Day, as it is each and every Wednesday for the last 4+ years. As always, I am Ken Reed. I am your humble host here to discuss classic television with friends, people I admire, talented people, writers, comedians, musicians, anyone that I find interesting. And today is an incredibly special episode of the show because this may be the person I find the most interesting. I am blown away that I got to speak with this guest. If you are a regular listener of the show from the beginning, you've probably heard me ad nauseum discuss how much I enjoy the work of Bonnie Hunt and how much I respect her as a person and as a performer and a unique example of integrity in the entertainment industry. And I amazingly got to speak with her. I cannot thank her enough for sitting down and talking to me. She has an incredibly busy schedule. To take an hour of her time and sit down and talk to little old me is just amazing. I cannot believe it. I cannot thank her enough. And she is just as funny and smart and gracious and wonderful as you would imagine, meeting her in person. When I started this show 4+ years ago, talking to friends and comedians, and it's ballooned where I've gotten to meet so many great people and become friends with so many great people that I've admired over the years. I am never not amazed by it. And I need to thank you. That's right, you, the listener, for allowing me to do so, for listening every week, the emails you guys send, the messages on Twitter and Facebook. It's incredibly encouraging. I always kind of joke that I would do this show even if nobody listened, but I need you guys to listen because it makes it all worth it. But it's amazing. And I recorded this in LA. I just got back, and I do want to thank you guys again, not only for those of you that listen, but for those of you that go over and above and contribute to the Patreon. It may seem like small change, $1 here, $1 there, $5 here, $10 there, but it adds up every month, and it allows me to not lose a ton of money on the show and go out to LA, go to New York, go to places, and do these kind of interviews with people like Bonnie Hunt. But there are very few people like Bonnie Hunt, and if you are unfamiliar with her work for some strange reason, get familiar with it. You may only know her from Cheaper by the Dozen, or Beethoven, or Jumanji, and she's great in all those. But she is a Second City alum. She is an incredible writer, director, improver, just absolutely amazing. I first saw her on Grand, which we discuss here, and she was great on that. She also is one of my heroes, and for a variety of reasons, which I won't get into here because we discussed it in the episode, but just the down-to-earth, blue-collar humbleness that she possesses while having this incredible talent is amazing. And I will not gush any further. It is rare that I get nervous on this show. I am usually able to suppress it somehow, even though I've met so many of my heroes and people that I admire, and I've been lucky enough to talk to them for this show. I'm usually able to daylight savings time my nervousness till after the episode, usually when I'm editing it. But I was terrified and nervous to meet Bonnie, but she is so nice and so welcoming and so easy to talk to that it melted away, and I had an incredible time talking to her. So again, I thank you guys. I thank Bonnie for sitting down and doing this. I still can't believe it happened. And thankfully I have a audio recording of such. Otherwise, I may think it was all a dream. LA, always great. We've had an extended winter here in Boston. I am currently sitting looking out my window in the office here, and we are on our 4th snowstorm, 3 of which I missed while I was in LA, living the glamorous life, Sheila E. style. The dogs were left here with dog sitters who did a wonderful job, but 2 weeks was far too long. They got very anxious, completely trashed the house. Not completely. They ate a Blu-ray box set of The Master, the Lee Van Cleef Van Patten ninja show. They ate 2 seasons of The X-Files, seasons 1 and 3. For some reason left 2 and 4 alone. I don't know why. Maybe they just like odd or hate odd seasons of The X-Files. It wasn't as bad as it seemed, but I got home at like 3 in the morning because we had to change a tire on the airplane, which if you've never seen, I highly recommend. It's not like the AAA Cars coming to Cars, another movie that Bonnie Hunt was in, to change your car tire. But they had ripped open a feather pillow that I got on clearance at HomeGoods, by the way. That was a high quality pillow apparently because it had about, I'm not good at estimating, maybe 10,000 ducks worth of feathers in this pillow that were all over the house. So that was the majority of the mess. But they're all fine now, and I'm back here in Boston, jet lagged and still reeling from my trip. But in the meantime, while I get over my jet lag, which I think is just lag at this point, please sit back, relax, and enjoy this monumental episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, the one, the only, Bonnie Hunt.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Bonnie Hunt, how are you?
Great.
Thank you so much for doing this.
I'm happy to be here.
We're in our weird Glendale Airbnb. We were just giving you the tour.
I love it, though.
It is
There's
pretty nice.
horses nearby, a baby horse.
Yes, there's Contessa, the 2-month-old baby horse. It's always funny when we're like we should live out here, and I'm like, but we're like vacationing like we're rich out here. It is a little bit different.
It's different.
Yeah.
The reality of actually moving and living someplace that you have that nirvana experience with is always different.
The apartment we would afford in actual Glendale probably wouldn't have a pool and a horse, but
It might have a horse.
it might have a horse that you have a roommate. It might be a Mr. Ed situation. Where
It wouldn't be bad. Mr. Ed, I love
he
that
could
show.
pay his own. He could pay his own way, or it might be in a pool. It might be a water polo horse. So I've given you sort of.
You've gone too far now.
I know I have. It's bad now. Some sort of 70s issues here. When I kind of guessed was probably when the prime TV watching time in the Hunt household.
Right. And TV Guide was the biggest deal. I mean, you would get it and devour it.
So you
You'd
guys
read
got that and not the free one in the Chicago Sun-Times or something.
Well, we got the Sun-Times one, but if we, I mean, this is a big part of my childhood because depending on who was on the cover, and then I loved reading the little blurbs of, actually my first TV series was there was still TV Guide.
Oh yeah, it's still around weirdly.
It's a big version,
yeah,
right?
it's like kind of like Entertainment Weekly. And
Yes, it looks like a magazine. Yeah.
It's just all PR stuff. Like no one actually writes it, I don't think anymore.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, the building got great write-ups in TV Guide.
It did.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things I've ever produced or written or
I
worked
love that
on.
show.
It was right, from my heart. So pure. My writing was so just from my heart.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that something like that got on the air where it's so evident that it's from a very specific person's point of view.
I was the first person to ever write and star in their own series. It was unheard of. I didn't know that.
Right.
And I didn't know that every woman in the history of television had her husband running the show. Right. Mary Tyler Moore, Lucille
Grant
Ball,
Tinker,
Linda Bloodworth Thomason, Diane English. I mean, everybody had their brother or their husband.
So you're an innovator out of pure ignorance. Yes.
Yes. And when I first wrote the show, the agency I was with dropped me because they said, you have to decide which lane you're going to be in. Are you going to be a writer or an actress? And I said, I want to be a storyteller.
Yeah.
I want to be a part of good stories. And so I wrote the show and they dropped me because I was trying to sell it. And then when I went to CBS at the time, they were like, well, who's going to write the show? I said, I will. It's no problem. I didn't know that there was 20 writers on every show.
Yeah.
But I did. I wrote 33 episodes before I sold it and brought them all in a legal box.
I've done that with shows I pitched where I'm like, I'm pitching a show. Here's 13 episodes. And they're like, what?
But it gave them comfort. And then we did the show as a play because when they read it, they're like, there's no jokes. And I said, I don't really write jokes. I write situations.
Characters and atmosphere.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was all character driven. So we did it as a play in the basement at CBS, me and George Clooney and Tom Virtue. It was a great group of buddies, and they bought it right after that.
Because when you moved out here, you knew Clooney as job an actor kind
I
of
knew
thing?
George in Chicago.
Okay, okay.
He was doing Sid and Nancy, I think the Sid Vicious play.
I didn't even know he was in that.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's how we met. He had come to, I met him definitely at Second City after the show one night, and we were all actors trying to make it.
When he did the building, he was just on ER, I think? He was just kind of breaking on ER?
Gosh, no. ER was 10 years later.
Oh, was it that long later?
Yeah, George was...
Because he had been in so many sitcoms for a decade and a half that just didn't... They kept putting him in stuff.
And he did a lot of hour dramas, too.
Oh, yeah. That's true as well.
That's why when people say, you got another show that didn't make it, it's like...
Yeah.
Betty White had 5 canceled TV series that she was starring in before.
That had her name
Mary
on
Tyler
it.
Moore. Mm-hmm.
But it's amazing that like anything gets made. I always say anything good being made is despite of everything, not because of it. It's kind of, you have to go through this gauntlet. And one of the reasons I admire what you've done so much is for the very reason we talked about. You got this very pure, very you thing on the air. And for at all.
And I hired all unknowns, basically. George we were all unknown. But they were my friends, and they were very, very, very talented.
Yeah, I think Don was the only one I'd seen pop up and stuff because I watched Super Dave.
Yes,
I think that was the only.
Don.
Yeah,
he had made a name for himself in Canada, but we had met in L.A. and instant bond, great friendship all these years. He's just a great guy and extremely hilarious.
Yeah, he's a very recognizable character actor too for people, but got to do a pretty different role in that show too. Like it'd be a little bit less. He would usually end up playing like guy complaining about stuff.
He was my neighbor that always borrowed things from me, and I was never giving him enough. And we all have those people that are put upon friends where they're just always exhausted and nobody's life is harder than theirs. And he used to come over to my apartment all the time to eat in that show. I loved that character.
It was such a great, like warm, it felt like they were really your friends because it sounds like they actually were.
They were, and they were based on the friends that I had when I worked as a nurse and during the day and was at Second City at night. I lived in an apartment building, and it was a lot of different characters, and I was in all of their lives. We all became a support system for each other.
Yeah, it's like a de facto family. And that was missing, I think, from a lot of shows in the 90s that tried to do that workplace sitcom or like a Friends sort of rip off or play on Friends.
Right.
They didn't seem like they were actually that surrogate family. And it rang sort of false. Like people were more sort of plot devices instead of characters.
Right.
Which again is why that show rang so true to me. Having written the 33 episodes, did you reappropriate any of the stuff that you wrote for anything else later?
I did, because we only did 6 episodes, and I think only 5 aired or something. And then they wanted to replace a couple of the cast members because I think they had Valerie Bertinelli and John Cryer. I think that's who it was, they were on a holding deal at CBS. So CBS said, take 2 people out of the show and plug them in. And I said, I can't. And I would have if somebody had failed or they weren't doing their part, but everybody had made the show what it was. We were an ensemble. And in hindsight, I don't know if it would have been better to have followed their lead, but I just couldn't do it. In fact, I said to the executive, I can't. These are not only my friends, but they've done a terrific job. And he said, I'll call them for you. And I said, no, that's not the point.
That's not better. That's worse.
But when I know that on Tina Fey's show, Rachel Dratch was originally cast on it. And then they just, the studio came to her in the network, whatever, and said, change it. And she did. So, your friend is still going to love you. But at the time, I just felt like it wasn't right. So that show was canceled. And then they came back to me. CBS came back to me. They sent me a bunch of flowers and then a tape of Frank Sinatra singing Love's Much Lovelier the second time around.
Right.
And they said, come back and if you can revamp the show. And so I did the Bonnie Hunt show where I was a news reporter in Chicago. Which
I loved because you were doing like real news segments, right?
Those were all improvised. Yeah. And at the time, even in the building, nobody had overlapping dialogue. I fought for all of that. I used 5 cameras instead of 4. I shot it like a single camera with 5 cameras. I did, I was doing all this stuff that I imagined in my head Desi Arnaz would probably do if he had the
access to
the technical stuff that we had now. And so that was really exciting for me.
You shot those both in front of live audiences?
Yes.
Was it hard?
Except for the remote segments, which were all done in Chicago on the street, man on the street stuff. So.
Did those air on a local news station? I think I read that, or they weren't. They didn't air as segments.
No, those were just for the show.
I always wondered how, when you're doing a very improvised, sort of structured but looser show, because I think people a lot of people don't know how strict a 3-camera sitcom schedule is. It's laid out and it takes forever and it's so regimented.
Yes. I mean, that's what I did originally. I did a series entitled Grand, and then I went right on to Davis Rules. And I was watching this process, and as a nurse, when I ran the floor,
Right.
you know, it's about efficiency and triage and deciding what's, you know, who needs you the most. And I felt that same way about the process of shooting the show. I'm like, why is this taking 3 or 4 hours in front of a live audience? I feel like they're guests. I feel like we're making them wait. I would have so much anxiety.
Right.
So when I did the Building and the Bonnie Hunt show, we shot them in front of a live audience in real time. So even though I say there was improvisation, it really was know your script. I felt like my job was to give everybody a really strong character and the best dialogue I could give them.
Right.
I couldn't wait for my actors to read the script to see if they would laugh at it and love it. It made me so happy. But then they also knew that in the moment, if something struck them or something happened or something felt different, they could say or do what they wanted as long as they stayed in character. And we would do it in real time. So, I mean, our show, the taping would start at 6:30 and the audience would be out of there by 8.
Like a Second City show, or like
That's what we did. We even rehearsed the, you know, moving between scenes. Let's do it as fast as we can. So I would write to kind of take that into account.
Because even as a stand-up, when I've gone to tapings, because like my friend's writing on a show, come to this taping, it's like a hostage situation.
It is.
They like take your coat and bag so you won't leave because you're there for 8 hours.
And it changes the energy of it.
Yeah.
I always feel like when I watch the Honeymooners, I think the reason this still feels good to me is because they're so in the moment.
Yeah.
They're doing it live. And I feel that. So I wanted my actors to have that type of energy. I mean, maybe it's a subtle difference, but to me, it made a big difference. And I didn't use a laugh track either. You know,
Right,
that was
it's real
another big
laughs.
fight.
They were
you
like,
know.
we need to sweeten this. It's like too...
They did, and there were times that they were probably right, but I just wanted, I was, you know, so pure about it.
It's amazing they let you, like you obviously made your case and they were like, okay, we'll let you do that. But
Yes,
that's
because I
really
was
hard.
always willing to not do it.
Right. You go, let's try it, see how it works, and then I can not do it, but like, let's at least give it a shot.
That's what
kind
I
of.
always say to them. Can you just let me show you
Right.
how this would be?
So the first thing I think and you alluded to earlier that I ever saw you on was Grand, and I loved that show.
It's a great show.
It was so unusual because it was a dramedy, really,
Yes.
but had very silly elements as well, and somehow had this tone that I did not see on TV at that time at all, and it was very unique and odd, and I was constantly telling people how great it was, and people were just like, I don't understand what that show is.
It was very different. I mean, even as an actor, when I got the script, well, they really just had little scenes and moments of characters. They didn't really have the script when I first went in, but you could sense that it was just a different rhythm, a different tone, and dark.
Yeah.
And I liked it because the darkness came from this honesty of desperation. Like the guy I was married to, Michael McKean, in the show was so desperate and wanting to get ahead. And there was something so real about that. And me playing the poor little rich girl.
Right. But not as a cartoon. Like it was a real character. It wasn't like, you know, as much as I love Julia Duffy on Newhart, who's hilarious and great on that show, like the character you played on Grand could have been that kind of character very easily.
Right.
If not having the sort of depth and emotion of like a real person. And that was where it really shone as a totally different thing, where you were seeing, and how they all interacted.
Right.
All the different characters weren't, it was such a huge cast for a sitcom.
It was a big cast, 2 different worlds, you know, the poor and the rich. And Michael Leeson, I think that was his mind. And it was very soap-esque, kind of like soap. And it was funny, and all the actors were so good. And they let me have a lot of input. I didn't know there was a writers guild. I didn't know anything at the time.
Because that was the very first thing. You'd done a couple movie parts before that, right?
I had just done Rain Man. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, that I took 3 days off from the hospital to do that. And I thought, that's all I'll ever do.
was cool.
And that was fun. I'll have a videotape at the time, you know, when I'm old and gray to say, oh, yeah, I did this once. But Grand for me, they would always call me into the writer's room. I was always giving ideas, and they let me have a lot of input. And I was really educated being in that writer's room on that show every week.
It's funny when that's your first thing and you probably just assume everything's like that after that. You're like, oh, this is great. You think the actors get to go in and contribute to
Well,
the
not all the act. I was the only actor that was in that writer's room.
Yeah.
So I mean, I felt like a drug dealer at one point because they would call me at like 1 o'clock in the morning and go, you got anything? I said, I'll come by.
Meet us around the corner.
Yes.
Get some pages.
But I loved it. Jerry Belson was there. He would lie in the middle of the floor and just come up with one-liners. It was just really an education.
Yeah, and then for Davis Rules, was that I think you had maybe met Jonathan Winters before that. You were on a Letterman with him, I think, as just a guest. Was that
No, I met Jonathan on the studio lot. Just adored him when I was growing up, and my dad loved him, and so that always had a big influence on me because my dad died when I was young, and remembering his laughter and the calm that would come over him when he would watch these incredibly talented people like Jonathan Winters or Jackie Gleason was so powerful for me. So I was so excited to meet Jonathan because I was doing Grand and they were doing Davis Rules, and so I did a guest spot. Because it was the same production company,
right.
Carsey Warner, and I played Randy Quaid's sister, because we look so much alike.
Yes, exactly.
And at that time, Delta Burke left Designing Women, so they came to me and offered me Designing Women, and they offered me so much money.
I bet.
Like more money than I made in 2 years as a nurse that I would make in a week. But it wasn't my style of comedy.
Right.
I appreciated the show. I respected it, but it wasn't my style. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. How can I not take this money and do this show? Because it is a good show. People, everybody I knew loved it. And then they came to me with Davis Rules, which was half the amount of money, but still a lot.
Yeah.
But it was Jonathan Winters and Audrey Meadows would be playing my parents. And I was like, they don't even have to pay me.
I'll pay you?
I'm taking this job. And that was another big agency issue.
Because they were like, obviously because they get a cut, take the big
Well, not only they get the cut, but Designing Women was a huge show. Yeah. And they offered me, I would be on the cover of TV Guide as, Delta's replacement. Yeah. I was going to be presenting at the Emmys. They were putting all these little things, bonus gifts on the deal. But my heart was definitely with Jonathan and Audrey Meadows. And I am so happy that I made that decision that was right in my heart, because Jonathan Winters became like a father to me. And we were best friends till the day he died.
And I remember you having him on Life with Bonnie, which was amazing.
Nominated for an Emmy for that.
Back to the Designing Women thing too. I imagine there was so much baggage though that would have come with that role, because it was one of the first times I remember the media really covering like somebody sort of not quite amiably leaving a series, and it was kind of everywhere. So I think anyone who stepped into that show then, no matter how great they were, there would have been some weirdness.
That's true, Ken. And I wasn't even that sophisticated to even think that deeply. I was just thinking about I was a cancer nurse before I came to LA. So my mind was, what is the right thing? What feels right in your heart? I mean, I saw so many people. I learned so much from my patients about those types of decisions. And I mean, Audrey Meadows, she was just the greatest, classiest, most hilarious lady. We were very, very close also. Was it difficult to act opposite these people that you grew up watching? Or, I mean, especially obviously when like Winters is imbued with all the stuff with your personal stuff with your father and that. I imagine it's really difficult to work with them. Yes, I was in awe. In fact, I'd be in a scene with Audrey Meadows and I realized I had a lot of her mannerisms. And I said to her, I can't do me because I've been doing you, and I didn't even realize it. But the Honeymooners was church in our house. Yeah. It was medicine, the greatest show, and so emotionally honest. As ridiculous as some of the situations would be, it didn't matter because their hearts were so honest. It had that bittersweet, like the thing I always lament is sort of the loss of blue collar shows, like having grown up in Boston, probably in a somewhat similar same way
scenario.
As I did. Yeah.
There's that gallows humor you get when you don't have a lot of money, and like Roseanne captured that well. Roseanne was the last one to really capture that. They would bust each other's balls, but they would stand up for each other, and it wasn't. A lot of stuff now becomes very hateful and mean-spirited. I remember thinking Murphy Brown was kind of like the turning point, which Diana's bringing back. Yeah. I remember watching that show and saying, "Oh, they're all kind of, I have this theory that there was this change where it was codependents that were funny, and then it became these independents that were really only out for themselves. Everybody only
cared about themselves and would do anything to take care of themselves. And that kind of was that Murphy Brown turn where it became a different type of humor. Not as comforting to me. I appreciated it and I get it and I'd laugh, but not as comforting. Yeah, and you can still have like I'm thinking immediately of like the Frankie character on Life with Bonnie, because that was such a sweet, not a throwaway character, but it could have been easily been the little kid next door. But there was these dark little hints. His life was really sad. Yeah, that was terrible, but it was never sort of relished on or looked at in like it's a very special episode kind of way. It was the way that I remember you had kids like that in your neighborhood. Oh my! I love that you noticed that, and that's why I'm doing this podcast, because I know you get it. Oh, thank you. And that means a lot to me. Oh, thank you. And there's so many people out there that do. When somebody comes up to you in the grocery store, nobody ever asks me for an autograph. They go, "Can I give you a hug?" Or it's so emotional, and I just love that part of my career. It's rare. I mean, that's why you stand out so much, because that. I miss that in a lot of media, and especially in the world today. Like, there's very little, and the Honeymooners was like that for me as well as a kid. Right. And even though Jackie Gleason could be scary sometimes, like again, like your own parents sometimes, or you'd be at a friend's house and their dad would be really angry, but it was weirdly familiar in a weird way. And that struggle of people where humor comes out of, life is hard and sometimes awful, and we make jokes about it. Right. Is what always appealed to me about sitcoms and shows, and even things like Cheers that weren't straight, family sitcoms. But Cheers was hilarious and heartfelt and funny and character driven and brilliant. But it seems like that's really difficult to convince networks to do. Because it's settled. It doesn't fly off the page. It's not gimmicky. It's harder to write. But it's so fulfilling. Yeah. For me, it depends on the person. I mean, I have respect for all genres and different styles. I'm just talking specifically about what you and I are relating to is what we love. Like Frankie, the little boy next door, who we let the audience know that his life, through the things that kids say out loud, we know that that's a horrible household, and he's more comfortable at our house. And we all had kids like that in our neighborhood. Yeah, that just basically lived at your house, and it was just unspoken, and no one dwelled on it. Right. It was just, that's what we do, My mom welcomed everybody, every child, every animal, everybody. Yeah. So you're the only one in your family that went into any sort of entertainment industry, right? Isn't everyone else? My sister Carol is a children's book author, but also teaches improv. She was going into this business, but then, got married and had kids, and is still in the neighborhood, but she's hilarious, and she's been on a lot of my shows. I always hire Carol. And then my sister Kathy was a writer as well and a producer on some of my stuff. Did they do Second City stuff with you as well, or is that? They did. Carol did Second City, but she didn't end up, making a commitment and choosing it as her life. So were you a huge SCTV fan? Oh my God. Yes. The best sketches ever in the world. Yes. That's way over SNL. Oh, please. Yeah. But see, here's the difference. At Second City, when I was working there, Bernie Solins and Fred Kaz, the director and the musical director, came to me and said, you're fast on your feet, and we want you to, always play at the top of your intelligence. And I was like, okay, guys, whatever. So I always went to the second thought. There was always the idea to do the humor that's sexual innuendo or the layup. And the dick jokes, and that's like Saturday Night Live is just full. It's like sometimes I watch it and I go, really? Every scene you have to talk about your body part? It's just, to me, it's not like prude-ish or anything. It's just not clever. Lazy. It's so lazy. And at Second City, when you're trained and you're doing 8 shows a week for 4 years and you're thinking at that level, when you start writing, you want to be at that level. You want to go to that second thought. Yeah. And that's funny. The Second City is almost a double meaning when you say that. I think right. The second thought. But then you look at SCTV, that was such character-rich, character-driven humor that, I mean, you can't say SCTV without smiling. Yeah. I mean, it's
it also rewarded you for watching for a long time because
Right.
they would throw in references like
Callback, yeah.
like the I always reference the Count Floyd as Floyd Robertson, who's an alcoholic,
Right.
like subtly, and then is driven to be the kids show host. But they never explicitly mention that. You just pick up on that, and how like Johnny LaRue like evolved over time.
Oh, John.
Yeah, it's
John
just-
Candy. Just
He's so great on that.
the best. The best.
And the funny thing is, and I love John Candy, and I don't mean this as an insult to him. He's the weakest cast member on SCTV, which is how amazing SCTV is, because
Well,
his
I
characters
think-
are always him.
And also, John probably wasn't politically aggressive to get himself into scenes because he's the nicest man
Yeah.
in the world, and God rest his soul. And so he's probably the closest to Gleason we have as far as an emotional comedic actor of, physical stature that way, but also just so
Warm.
can
and-
touch your heart.
Yeah.
I love that.
There was an underseen movie that he did that I'm absolutely sure you know of, Only the Lonely, that he did.
Oh, of course.
with
Maureen O'Hara.
and that is my favorite role that he did because it's funny and bittersweet and sad and sometimes dark. Like you're like, Maureen O'Hara's a monster
I
sometimes in that
know,
movie.
but that Irish mom and
Yeah.
John is so John in that. It's really
Everyone
great
should see
movie.
that movie. It's fantastic.
It never gets old. It's timeless. Emotion is timeless.
Yeah,
And
that's
if you
true.
stick with that, it's really good.
I mean, that's what SCTV I rewatch all the time because even the stuff they're parodying, it has a weirder twist. So it's not
Joey
like
Heatherton. Just everything.
Jackie Rogers Jr.
Jackie Rogers. I saw Marty the other night. He's hilarious.
Oh, he's my favorite, yeah.
It's just like every time I see him, every character comes flooding to mind, and you just
Lawrence
want to
Orbach.
say thank you. Yes, you just want to say thank you. Thank you, because it is medicinal.
Absolutely.
I saw it firsthand in the hospital. I know how powerful it can be to make people just laugh.
Yeah, and not in a cheap way.
It wasn't cheap and it wasn't mean. It was
Yeah.
downright brilliant, hilarious, clever, character driven, top of the intelligence, so good.
But grotesque. Like
Yes.
sometimes, like they had no problem ugging up and being like really weird,
Fearless.
Yeah, and Andrea Martin would just hideous characters.
I know.
but you weren't ever really laughing at them. It was just so weird. Like I don't ever see that, and I miss shows like Amy Sedaris does a lot of stuff like that. Another Second City, obviously. She managed to kind of do more SCTV-ish sketch
She
stuff.
does.
later.
Amy does become those characters
Yeah.
and lives it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
And I miss that as well. And I'm constantly sort of praising SCTV and especially younger comics, and they never like it. Never.
I know you never see SCTV looking at the cue cards or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just they don't like it. You mean?
Yeah. They're like, I don't really like, it's off-putting to them for some reason, or they just don't. But at first I thought it was because maybe they didn't get, or they weren't familiar with the stuff they were parodying, which is one of the things I talk about on this show a lot, that when we grew up, we knew about the previous 50 years of entertainment
Right.
by accident. It was mostly because the stations just aired whatever was cheap. So we're watching Bowery Boys and things from the 30s, which you couldn't get a kid to watch something
No.
from 40 years ago.
Right.
But so we got that they were doing parodies of, Leave It to Beaver and that sort of stuff.
We all had the same reference.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it makes a difference.
And part of that too was even stuff I didn't see firsthand. I knew from like Mad Magazine or the Looney Tunes,
Mad
like,
Magazine's coming back.
Is it, they're doing, I wonder how you can
I don't
do
know.
it now.
It'll be interesting.
I would be curious to see how it works, because that was a magazine that I think people missed the point where they would be very, very, they were clearly fans of the stuff they were parodying. And so they got the essence of it.
That's right.
They weren't just being superficially satirical, which again, I think is what SNL has a problem with for me. And, and in stand-up too, like I never, as much as I love pop culture stuff and is such a huge part of who I am, I never used to do that stuff on stage for that sort of top of mind. I'd be like, well, everyone thought of that. We all
Right.
saw this. We all know this joke.
I know.
But then you realize that people don't, and you're kind of like, oh, I feel sad for you. Like everyone didn't just think of that same thing.
Remember Fernwood Tonight?
I loved Fernwood Tonight.
We did a little bit of that on my daytime talk show.
Yes.
I had quite a few guests that were not real, that we made fake books. And
Yep.
It's my favorite episodes. Like my trainer, Michael Haggerty was my physical trainer, and just his books. And my sister Carol was English Shirley, and she had diet books, Eat When No One's Looking, and lose 10 pounds in a week. It was the most ridiculous, and we would do it so straightforward.
Did people pick up? I feel like a lot of people probably didn't even notice.
Some people didn't. They would actually write in and say, I can't believe that guy's training her. Is she crazy?
Look at him,
yeah. But for the most part, people did get it, and they loved being part of that.
Yeah.
And I thought if they left us on, it would have just become what I loved about Fernwood Tonight.
That was a show that I didn't get to watch as much your daytime show because it was, it was on during the day. But that we're missing that sort of every day you kind of have in jokes, which SCTV was great on, that very thing where it's like you have to experience it. You have to be but it's almost interactive with the audience by the nature of the structure of it.
Right. And we had B magazine instead of O magazine, and I was on the cover of all of them.
Right.
But they were all, we made them up every week, and people would write in saying, and I'd say they're sold out. They're sold out everywhere. But the articles we would come up with, that would be some of the best time in the writer's room when we would just come up with the articles from the magazine.
But everyone probably read the magazines you were sort of parroting up and down. So you knew exactly what you were
doing.
Doing.
And we would always do it through the lens of a blue-collar girl from Chicago. And that was just so fulfilling. That was very Second City-esque in the writer's room. But that's the way I like the writer's room to be, is that everybody can say anything. And I also like the cameraman. Anybody who wants to throw out an idea or think something's better than what we're doing, say it.
Yeah. And I think that it sounds so simple. Like that makes perfect sense to me, but it's sad how unusual that is.
Well, because it's very scary to people that don't. I understand it's scary. When you have the talent and you have the vision and you're with these really talented people, you're kind of fearless. I always felt fearless because I was surrounded by so much talent all the time.
We can't fail. We have the support, sort of.
Right. And it's okay to say something that might get rejected or something that might be used. When it's encouraged, it's a lovely way to work, and it's not so territorial. And that happens on a lot of sitcoms. I mean, when Don and I did Life with Bonnie, we wrote all 44 episodes.
Right.
But they made me hire a writing staff. And I said, I don't need a writing staff. And Carl Reiner had given me a big lecture. Listen, I wrote 60 episodes of the Dick Van Dyke Show. You don't need anybody to help you. Don't let them talk you into these people. And they made me hire a writing staff. I had to interview all these people. I didn't know any of them. And I hired all of them, and I told them all the same thing. I'm being forced to hire you. We already have a lot written, and we're going to keep writing. Don and I kind of go into our cave and write. And then I said, depending on the actors and how the characters evolve, we might throw it all out and start over, just what clicks and what doesn't. You have to be open. And so I had them there for the first part of their contract.
Right.
And then I was like, we
don't need you. Sorry.
And they were all really talented. I mean, one of them was Doug Allen, I remember, and I said, you have a very masculine point of view, and you should go write a show about a group of buddies or guys or something, because he was very talented, but just not in my voice.
It's not the tone. But from a network perspective, they're probably like, Bonnie's so strong with this, let's get a counterpoint in there to have. But
actually,
it's like, no,
Doug and I had the same agent.
Okay.
And I had worked on his film Kissing a Fool.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So his agent called me and said, Doug really wants to work in the television business. How about giving him a shot on this? And I thought, yeah, he can join because I have to hire this writing staff.
Anyway. Yeah. I mean, it's funny how, it makes sense. You were talking to Carl Reiner and he said that because that's such an old traditional showbiz way to do that stuff.
I know.
Where stuff had a very strong voice. And I think of like Nat Heineken from Car 54, who wrote every episode of that show.
Oh, please.
And it's my favorite.
It's hilarious.
It's so modern.
Richard Kind and I used to sit and watch that show, and we would cackling. My neighbor used to get mad at me we were laughing so hard.
Stop! What are you watching? Car 54 in there again? But it's timeless, and like you that I've shown to people, and the two shows I always, because weirdly people ask me like, what should I watch? I'm like, is Barney Miller and Car 54.
Oh, Barney Miller,
character,
genius,
pure character. It's so hard to do, where it's just 5 characters in one room for 200 episodes.
Right.
Never boring, always funny, but would be dark without being exploitive. And that's so hard to do. And I love 3-camera sitcoms, and I feel like they get unfairly maligned because they're so hard to do. There's a lot of bad ones.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
To sort of your point of how you made a very smart sort of let's do it like a live show, it has a unique set of challenges, but a unique set of, I guess, attributes that make it better when you're able to do it. But it's just so hard. And so when it hits, it's the best.
Right. And it's the teamwork. It's the process and everybody relying on each other. I mean, I've had some cameramen that have been so hilarious and come up with so many great ideas. When you have that atmosphere and you foster it, the good comes out of everyone.
Right.
Everyone.
They're not afraid to get out of their lane. Like someone's going to be like, how dare you?
Right. Because we're a team. And that's how it was on the talk show too and on the movies. And, I've just been so lucky. I love the process and I love being able to run it because then I get to set the tone of, including everybody. And it's just really nice.
And you reuse the same people so many times too, because it seems like they click,
Right.
like you have David Allen Greer and Life
David.
with Bonnie,
I use David and everything because he's hilarious. I mean, on Life with Bonnie, we would do our own commercials for the talk show segment of that. So we're doing the live talk show, which was not scripted.
Right.
Then we're doing the commercials, and he would do that Jazzmo guy that owned the guitar place. And, Don and I would never write anything. We'd give him a location and say, you're the guitar guy and you're selling stuff. And he'd improvise.
But even like using speaking of Fernwood tonight, you had Martin Mull on.
Oh, Marty. My God.
The dog fashion show. Which
Martin
really
Mull.
funny.
We had him on as 3 different people.
Yeah.
And Dax Shepard, too. Those were his first shows because I met him on Cheaper by the Dozen. He had one line in Cheaper by the Dozen. I'm like, I'm putting you on my sitcom.
Yeah.
He's like, really? I go, yes, I'm calling you. He had one line, but I could see his comedy just coming through his soul. And he played my plastic surgeon and he played the director of a commercial. But it's like on the building, I had every store that anybody ever went into or any doctors, no matter what, you'd hear that ding, ding, like the old the bell. And I'd always look at it and notice it. And I was like, eventually people will
pick up on this running gag.
Right.
And again, it's that SCTV thing almost.
Right.
It's people don't need stuff spoon fed to them, and they'll pick up on it and they'll feel rewarded.
Yeah,
Like, they'll feel more
respect your
connected.
audience. You want them to feel good watching your show.
Like I always loved how you would reference, and I think you referenced it in multiple shows, Topos.
Oh, Topo Gitos, yeah.
But it's in like multiple shows.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, I was just going to Topos, and I'm like, oh, that's such a cool little like
It's
Easter
always
egg.
in everything.
Yeah,
exactly.
to sort of, which makes it feel like it's you. It's your thing, but doesn't feel like it's a retread. It's still an evolution.
I
of
love
different-
little stuff like that for people to notice, like in Return to Me at the end of the movie when they're in Italy, because the character in the beginning says, I promise we'll go to Italy. And the nun's riding the bike. When she gets off the bike in Italian, she says, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. Because I wanted to say a little tip of the hat to Frank Capra.
Were you going to the movies a lot, or were you mostly seeing this stuff on TV?
My mom, speaking of TV Guide, and I've told this story a million times, she would have TV Guide. She would look through it, and there would be these late night movies, like at midnight or 11:30, which was late. We were in school, and we were 7 kids. She would circle in the TV Guide and say, go to bed now. I'll wake you up, and we're all going to watch this movie together. And we were her friends, too. You know what I mean? My mom always says she was a singer. She was in show business. She was working at NBC at the Merchandise Mart in Chicago. She loved showbiz, but she said, I gave birth to my audience, and she stayed home.
Right.
So we would all get up, and she would make a Chef Boyardee pizza. And as my brother Pat said, by the time I was born, it had gotten so thin you could see through it, because she would just press on that dough to make it bigger.
Same pizza, more kids.
Exactly. The exact same pizza, more kids. And we would get up and watch these classic films, whether it was the Marx Brothers or Doris Day or, Fred Astaire. My mom, it's such a comfort to me thinking of that and how powerful it is. We're sharing the experience of a story, of humor, of characters, of heart, whether it's A Wonderful Life or any of the greats, Hitchcock, we knew them all.
And it's one of the things especially people who do comedy, there's a special thing about the stuff you watch with your parents where you try to reverse engineer what is making them laugh because you don't understand it and you want to. You go, oh, they're an adult. They know. What is it about this that sort of they're connecting with? So,
and you also see how powerful it is. I talk about this a lot when I talk to young writers, is that what we're doing is powerful. Like my dad had a lot of pressure and a lot of kids. Obviously, he died very young of a heart attack. There was a lot of stress.
Yeah.
But I would see these moments of him watching something on television and that laughter, or if it was just a good story he was totally involved with, whether it was Gunsmoke or whatever, just he was relating to a character and it was giving him a moment of peace.
It's a connection, not a distraction. And I think that seems to be what, on the creative side, people miss sometimes now. Or maybe I'm just too overly critical of it. But, with reality TV and that sort of stuff, people are like, we're just distracting. And it's like, no, it's a connecting thing. And with TV especially, which is so intimate because it's piped into your environment. It's in your house. You're not going out and seeing a movie. It's not an experience of outside of your regular world. So that does seem to be why it sticks with people more.
And we set a tone. I mean, when we talk about inclusion, like when I was a little girl, one of my friends, Shantae Williams, I remember saying to my mom, who does Shantae want to be in the movies? And my mom's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, nobody looks like her. I mean, I remember that as a teenager, realizing that. That's important, but we also set the tone about the energy that's in the world. And when there's so much violence and there's so much throwaway, especially for young women that are portrayed on TV, that emotion is not connected with us physically. And it is. We are different. And when that's so disregarded and it's not sacred, it's not important, it's not emotional, that on top of that and the violence and everything else and just the meanness, it changes the world.
Yeah.
It's powerful when we think about the dance crazes and, everybody watching West Side Story and dancing all the way home and having their hearts broken and realizing how important life is and family and, racism and everything else. It affects you, but we don't really have those moments as much. I mean, there's stuff that's important that's being done that's wonderful and great, and it's a golden age of television all over again.
Bum out.
Yeah.
It's so, like I find there are some great things, but I find myself dreading sometimes watching stuff because I'm like, every awful possible thing is going to happen to these characters, and it's just this anxiety, and it's well done, but
it leaves you sad.
Yeah.
There's like a sadness and emptiness afterwards that why didn't something? I mean, even watching some reality shows. Like when I watch The Bachelor, and I've had friends that have worked as camera operators on it, I always think there's all these adults in a room. And there's a 22-year-old girl that obviously has had too much to drink. It's now 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. And they're going to take advantage of this situation, put her on camera, regardless of how it affects her life, her family. Not one adult in that whole group, whether it's the network or an executive, is going to go over and say, you know what, honey, you might not want to make this decision. There's not one protector. Nobody stands up to protect because it's like, well, you don't have to protect anybody because look at.
It's a commodity and she agreed to this kind of thing.
Well, she knew what she was getting into, but you don't know. When you're not in show business and you're not, I mean, a lot of people go on it to get famous or whatever, but it's such an ick factor.
Yeah.
There's just a thing of why didn't somebody stop that?
Right. Or and especially not even just stop it, but not encourage it. Like there's a real, it really does bother me when I watch some of those shows and because you feel like you're part of it. And it bothers me that other people don't feel that way when they watch these sorts of things. So it's like, to the blue collar thing, I've noticed that shows have become all aspirational in two ways, in that like, wow, look how rich these people are, everything's great, or let's look at those rich people fail, or so sort of like Honey Boo Boo, where it's like, look at these dumb poor people, let's laugh at them for whatever, instead of like why is it that huge distance between?
Because I think it comes back to what you were talking about earlier, and it's so insightful, everything you just said. And it is personal. It's not, I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong.
Yeah.
It is a personal taste type of thing, but there is something about the trend of it's the demise of someone or someone being so revealing that it makes you feel like what you did isn't so bad.
Yeah.
That it comes back to laziness.
Yeah.
It's easier to just watch people be less than they're abilities because it makes us feel like, oh, okay, I don't have to do much.
Right. Or it's like I always recommend Stephen King's Danse Macabre to people, which is about horror fiction. But for comedy, I'm like, it's exactly the same mechanism.
Right.
Just a different payoff. And I'm like, you throw the cat at someone and they jump and it's scary, but then they're kind of mad at you. Like, it's a different thing than if you like a character and you're worried for them in a sort of suspense way.
Did you like Get Out?
I liked Get Out.
Me too.
Because it managed to be the allegory I miss with, I mean, Twilight Zone is a show that I'm like, made us all better people.
Right.
And you do see people get their comeuppance. You see bad people have bad things happen to them, but it's not in the same way. You really go, oh, because the whole message is like, don't be a jerk to people.
That's the whole message.
And Get Out had that tone without being, I like Black Mirror, but it's a little too wallowy in the worst possible thing. And Get Out had that. Like I watched it finally, the new version.
Yeah.
It's very good. It manages to, it's weirdly very influenced by Stranger Things, which is weird because that was very influenced by it. But
the original, right?
Yeah, they missed the point of a lot of the stuff where, to me, the whole point of that is those kids are all working together and they're stronger together. And they make the girl, first of all, they way overly sexualize her, which is really weird. But because she's like 13 and all the kid actors are amazing in it, which made it even worse because I'm like, this girl's such a good actor. But they make her kidnapped and they have to save her. And I'm like, no, the book, she's like the one that makes them a stronger unit. Like, that's the point. They defeat this monster as kids who are stronger together. And I'm like, how are we missing? You got almost, it looks right, it sounds right, and you miss this piece. And I feel like most people don't care.
Most people don't care. I mean, that's why I keep saying it's a personal thing. I mean, I deal with this all the time, and I'm out there writing and still working, and it's still hard for me to get something going, even though you're
proven commodity.
Well, I mean, none of my shows have stayed on long enough, but there is an emotional connection to them that I'm very proud of with my fans.
Yeah.
Most of which are in this room. My friend Jane's
she's been cheering the whole time. It's right. But like Return to Me is, I love that movie so much for a lot of reasons.
Oh,
but
thanks.
There's some of the most brutally sad moments I've ever seen in anything in that. Like, and I always cite the scene with Duchovny and the dog at the door waiting for her to come home. It's brutal.
I sobbed writing that scene. I remember sitting at the laptop sobbing.
You can't watch it and not sob. Oh, yeah, me too. Like, person gets killed, don't care. Dog is sad.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, which is why I have trouble with Wes Anderson movies sometimes, because a dog always gets killed randomly in all his movies, and I'm like,
Royal Tannenbaums. I'm like, no, not the dog.
Don't kill the dog.
I have to fast forward. I love that movie, but I have to fast forward the dog part.
Because you're like, why? Why'd you do that? But it's redeemed. It makes sense in the story, right. and it makes the payoff of the happy ending as high as the low is of the sadness. And stuff.
You got to have something at stake.
Yeah, and now I see stuff where it'll just be the sadness the whole time, and you're like, you have to give me some sort of redemption here.
But it depends on how. I mean, for me, the way I was raised, in the saddest moments, there was still humor.
Yeah.
And that didn't escape my that's in my writing. That's part of who I am, and that's part of our coping mechanism.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we just need therapy, but
that's also just, probably too.
Yes. Yeah. But that's the way we dealt with stuff as children.
Yeah. I mean, my sister had childhood cancer, and my family were very blue collar, and you would make jokes about it.
Right.
And it's people get very uncomfortable. Like, even on stage, like, I'll make jokes about my mother's death because there was not the actual death, but like there was a lot of funny, weird things that happened around it. And people shut down. But I'm like, but that's why we have humor. Like, it's for this.
That's right. It's therapeutic.
And you do get people who are like, I think to your point of the people who are fans of yours are huge fans. Like, they very much connect. The people who do like it are like, yes, that's what it's for, and I get it. But I think most people aren't comfortable with someone being so aware of why we're making jokes.
Yeah, and you have to take your time to do it too. You have to set up your characters, make sure that they have a heart and soul and some identity to go on the journey of the story.
Do you have obviously the Honeymooners, but are there other shows that you revisit or like rewatch now that are like your comfort shows or anything like that?
I hate to say this, might sound like I'm a crazy person, but I can actually watch shows in my head.
I do the same thing. Did it in school. That's what I would do in school.
I was a terrible student, and I would be entertained. I mean, the Odd Couple was hilarious. Barney Miller, the Honeymooners, obviously. I was probably less of a Lucy type show because I always felt like I found it frustrating that they weren't smarter.
It's very physical too, which was never really my style of humor.
Right. But I'm comforted by all those shows. I mean, the Andy Griffith Show, the characters were, I mean, talk about just taking your time. And it's interesting. I have all these nieces and nephews. They were raised on those shows. We made them watch them. It's so funny. We made them all. They would watch them with us. And they have that keen sense of humor. It's so, I love seeing them work. I have a niece who's a producer in Chicago for the HTV TV type shows. But you can just see her humor and that sense of story and character. I love it.
That you just absorb, like your mom did with watching the movies, but you just absorb it. It's so good. You're learning without knowing that you're learning. And it's funny because Rachel, my wife, is from England and obviously didn't have Andy Griffith.
Oh, I thought that accent was fake the minute I met
it's fake. She doesn't do a good accent. But recently, like on Netflix, she's discovered Andy Griffith, mostly because she saw the parodies on SCTV where they did the Merv Griffith.
Oh, please. Remember Floyd?
Oh, well, Eugene Levy's always said he plays Floyd post-stroke exclusively.
Yes.
So he was like, oh, breather. And I was like, that's so cruel, but really funny and well observed. Like most people wouldn't notice that difference.
Right.
And to be like,
because he was always sitting after that, after his stroke on the episodes.
Like, no lines really. And his voice, but now watches it like every night, like getting ready for bed.
Does she love it?
Loves it.
It was such a pure show, so character driven, so brilliant. And Andy Griffith, of course, it always takes someone to be a visionary and hold the standard, the bar where it was. And Andy Griffith did that on that show.
And it's funny too, like as an adult discovering what kind of actor he was, like seeing a face in the crowd and being like, he's so smart and his Andy Griffith, which has a lot of parallels to that character on the surface. You're like, this is a patently evil, bad person who's playing aw shucks. And this is a good guy playing aw shucks to put people at ease to help them. But it's a very similar, and you're like, wow, Andy Griffith like blows my mind.
Oh, he was always the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
From everything I know about him through friends that knew him very well. And he just was brilliant. And he had a standard. And that's the thing. It's like, I've been so selective, and you have to keep your life small because you have to be willing to say no to things that don't feel right.
And people think you're crazy when you do that, I'm sure. I get that on my micro level of non-success.
No, it's the same as me. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like, what are you? I mean, I turned down a lot of stuff because it just didn't feel right. Like it doesn't make you laugh.
Yeah, it's
not in an honest way.
Right.
I get it. I can look at it technically and say, oh, I see why this is funny.
But it's not for me.
It's not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have a day job still, and everyone I started comedy with doesn't. And I'm like, but I can.
That was me, Ken.
I can say no. I don't have to do this guy's, this corporate gig where like make jokes about his ex-wife with a boss. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't have to do that. And at the end
not
of the
that
day,
she doesn't deserve to have those jokes
she was
made.
awful.
I mean, my God, she slept around.
We all know her. But at the end of the day, the stuff you make is great. And it's great stuff. And if there's not as much, it's quality over quantity, sort of. And especially with television and that stuff that endures, like that's so important. And again, I think that's lost a little bit now, which is why I find myself watching a lot of older things. Or there's also so many things to rediscover. Like that's the one great thing of you can watch everything.
It is
now.
kind of the golden age of television again. There's so many places to go do a show. There's so many places to find shows. And there is some really great stuff. And, it's very exciting. I feel lucky to be a part of it.
It reminds me of the 80s when there was like cable and was just starting. We still had UHF stations, so there was this thirst for content. And they were just like, anything. We just need content. And a lot of great weird stuff got through because they just didn't know. And it's kind of like that now with all the streaming stuff. And some of my favorite comedies have been on that. And like the shows we've been loving there's a show called Nailed It on Netflix.
Miss, if you're going to be in the room. Jane, are you
Disruptive.
comfortable? My friend is sitting with
Yes.
her. Why don't you have your back to the back of the chair? Oh, that's odd. She just gave me the finger.
She did. A double finger, too. It was very weird. She's painting signs. To have...
Don't ask her about
Yes,
this.
like, no, boo. Yes. It's a cooking show, but it's based on that premise of...
Nailed it?
Yeah, nailed it. Based on the premise of like Pinterest, where people see a cake and then they try to recreate it at home and it's terrible. But it's amateur bakers and everyone's so nice and having fun, and like the judges are very encouraging. Everyone's just laughing. Like the person will pull up the thing and it's horrible and they'll just start laughing and everyone's and I'm like, why don't I have this tone on everything? And that show wouldn't never have been greenlit by like Food Network or something because it's not that overly serious.
Right.
And I'm like, so because of Netflix, we're getting this kind of thing, which is not Stranger Things. It's not Black Mirror. It's not that sort of heavy, higher level stuff. We're still getting these kind of things, which is great too.
I know, but I look at Stranger Things and I'm thinking, how much are they spending an episode? 7 to 8 million?
Oh, easily. It's a movie every week.
Right.
Which you can see, it shows, but maybe isn't necessary.
I know. I'm out pitching a show now, and I go out next week with it, and I'm just aching to be back in there with one of my type of shows because there's so many places to go now to do something the way you really want to do it.
Which is great. Like now you could make The Building.
That's
and
right.
not have people go, it's weird that you wrote 33 episodes.
And it's weird that there's overlapping dialogue and, you know, you're using the cameras in a different way and, you know, breaking all the rules.
It's like, don't spend more than this and we're happy. Almost now, which is amazing. But it's hard to stand out too because there's so much stuff.
The competition, yeah.
Have you watched the new One Day at a Time?
No, I haven't.
That's fascinating.
Is it good?
It's good, but it's so weird how little it's different from the original, but absolutely works and doesn't feel like a throwback. That was what was amazing. I haven't watched all of it, but when I've checked it out.
So are they doing the actual
scripts?
Yes.
The first few episodes they did.
Wow.
But it's a Latino family.
Right.
But it totally works because that's who that family would be now. And it's really fascinating to see that work on a level that when people are like, oh, that's an old-fashioned show, it's not going to, all that Norman Lear stuff. And I watched that.
Well, Norman Lear is way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
I mean, if All in the Family were on right now, I mean, it's basically what we're kind of living
Pretty
through.
much, yeah. People were like that. Well, I always joke that my dad does this, that he watches All in the Family wrong. He's like, Archie Bunker, that guy's the best.
Of
And you're
course.
like, no, he's a sad old man and you're supposed to feel bad for him.
I know, but in our house too, I mean, that's who you related to and laughed at when we were kids because there was men in the neighborhood like that.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I wanted to work with Carol O'Connor. I wanted somebody who could bring that character to life so sincerely in a way that he would say the worst things, but you still loved him.
Yeah.
That's brilliant work.
He's
Writing
not a monster.
and acting.
It's coming from a real place.
Well, that's the thing. That's how we succeed in life. We succeed in life when we try to be more understanding instead of being understood.
Right.
And, you know, when you do that in your writing, it changes it.
Was that the first time you met him on Return to Me?
Yes. I wrote him a note and I didn't send the script. I wrote him a note saying I was doing a movie and this is who I was. And, you know, if he wanted to see any video of me or meet me. And he called me. I called the number that I had put on the card and he said, I'm old, I'm rich, and I'm tired and I don't want to work and I'm really sad because I lost my son.
Yeah.
And he had this deep sadness. And he would even leave the show on that his son was on with him in the heat of the night, just to hear his voice.
Oof.
And I said, okay. I said, well, Mr. O'Connor, you know, I lost my dad when I was young, and some of my fondest memories was watching All in the Family with him and you making him laugh. And if you would just read the script and then turn it down, I would feel better. If you would just read it, I would love just your opinion because I have so much respect for you.
Right.
Oh, I'll read it. And I didn't think he would. I thought he was being polite. And then he called me back a few days later and said, well, let's have dinner and talk about your script. I really liked it, but let's just have dinner, but I'm not interested.
Right.
So we went to dinner and he waited till we were at dinner in Malibu sitting at the table. And he just reached over and put his hand on mine. He says, I hope I'm healthy enough to do it, but I want to do your picture. when he called me, I want to do your picture. I was like, oh. And I cried all the way home.
I would.
I could not stop crying in the car. I couldn't stop crying. I felt so lucky.
Yeah.
So very, very fortunate. And, I gave those guys free rein.
You can tell.
The studio told me to cut the scenes with the old guys. So do you know what? We're in production. So my incredible team, again, surrounded by the best people in the world, lifting me up, my AD, my cinematographer, the great Laszlo Kovacs, he did Easy Rider. These people with all this talent. I went to them and I said, listen, the studio wants me to cut these scenes, but this is the heart and soul of the movie to me.
It's my favorite stuff.
So what we did, we didn't put the scenes on the schedule, went to these old actors and said, would you guys mind if I did this? We never did any dailies on them. Studio never saw the scenes. They were never on the schedule. They thought they were cut. And I shot them all and put them in my first cut. And then when we tested the movie, those old guys tested higher than anybody in the film. And the studio never said to me, well, wait a second.
Right.
We told you to cut those guys.
Where did those come from?
Yeah, they never,
Oops.
they don't even remember sometimes what notes they give you. So.
But seeing, or that exec's gone because he's 20 and there's some new guy in there. But like Robert Loggia, who's always a heavy and kind of scary and everything he's in, is so warm and perfect in that movie.
He was so happy. They were so happy making that movie. We just treated them with the respect that they deserve. And it's different now because I'm getting to be one of those older people that goes on a set. And, that tone is so important to me, the respect.
Yeah. Well, it comes from the top down of the person in charge, and people, you want people to want to be on your team to make the best thing possible, and not thinking about the next thing they're doing or as a stepping stone. And it reads when you watch these things, and they're great, and they're some of my favorite things. And and I get to thank you for making them, which I'm very happy to do because
it's really great, Ken, being interviewed, and that's why I'm here, because of your point of view and your intelligence and the fact that you get it. You're really talented.
Oh, thank you. That means the world coming from you. Is there anything you watch now that you can't, that like you're addicted to, or like you're just like, oh, this show I have to watch?
That I'm addicted to.
Or do you have an unwind show or anything like that?
Well, Project Runway I love because there's a beginning, middle, and end. There's a craft. People are, using their skills. And they've also gotten kinder to each other.
It's not as cutthroat.
Yes, it used to be they would say, they would almost be encouraged to say mean things about each other. And now there's a real camaraderie, and I really enjoy that. So that's something that's fulfilling to me. But as far as scripted series, let's see, what would I say that I would love now? Gosh, it would take more thought. I devour a lot of television.
Because you like it, or you're trying to see kind of what's out there?
Some that I love, some that I didn't want to watch and I forced myself to and then got completely hooked. Yeah. I like everything. I appreciate the process, and you think about how much work goes into Game of Thrones, or I like Ozarks. It's like I like stuff that character driven, and even if it's fantastical. I always use The Wizard of Oz as an example when I'm talking to young writers. They're like, well, this seems like a ridiculous situation. I said, the Return to Me is a ridiculous situation. It's absolutely absurd. And, I didn't want to do a movie where all of a sudden the woman has the other woman's memories and can see through her eyes and all that stuff.
It's not all of me.
Right. But when you look at those types of movies, but if you look at The Wizard of Oz, it still works, even though there's a grown man in a lion suit. Mm-hmm. It's obviously a grown man in a lion suit and a guy dressed up as a scarecrow. But it works because the emotion is so sincere. Mm-hmm. So that's when you start writing, if you can start with that sincere emotion and stay with it, no matter the world you build around it, it's going to work. So anything addicted to me would have to have that at the core of it.
Right.
And I wish I can give you a clear-cut answer. I know I'll go home and think of like the shows that I constantly watch, but I love everything.
It's hard. There's so much. It's hard to, and some shows you're like, I know I'm going to love this, and I kind of don't want to watch it because I know that that's 2 weeks of my life that people just be.
It's true.
Yeah,
and then there's stuff where I just cringe and I go, why?
Yeah.
With this whole Me Too movement and women, standing up for themselves and being represented, we also have to be careful how they're represented. Return to Me, they wanted me to film the car accident.
Oh, no.
And they said, in order for it to have impact, we have to see it. I said, no, please, I begged with them, please, please, please let me just, the dog at the door will let everybody know she's not coming home.
Yeah.
And you can't, it's like I always say dogs are like the perpetual 2-year-old that you have for 15, 17, 18 years.
Yeah.
They never grow up. It's very hard to explain things to them, but you just love them so much and they love you so much and you need each other.
Yeah.
And I just thought that dog is going to give us everything we need. And that was a big creative battle because it was a lot of money to shoot it. Luckily, I won it with the financial argument. It was the only way to win it because like, oh no, we have to see.
I wonder if that comes from your time as cancer nurse, because when I look at that scene, it seems much more real not seeing it, because when you get news like that, you didn't see it happen. You weren't there.
Exactly.
And that's worse.
It is worse. And you don't, when life changes in an instant, whether you hear the words you have cancer or there's been an accident, it's not, it goes from the reality, people always say, well, I just saw him yesterday. That's the feeling you want when you're telling a story. Here she is, young and healthy and everything's great. And now she's gone. The in-between part is not the part that's makes you feel the emotion. It's the aftermath, the finality, the loss.
The more cinematic you make that, the less impact there is of the actual event. Mm-hmm. And it's weird that people, especially studios, are sort of counterintuitive to that.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of great notes, but there's a lot of ones where you just go, oh, but you have to really you have to really know your story and stick by and know what battles to give up on and ones to fight. And, the thing about those great character actors that I'm so indebted to for Return to Me, Carol Connor and Robert Loggia saying to me, we'll be happy to shoot these scenes. I mean, I had to take them off the call sheet. Yeah. It was a big risk because I could have been in big trouble. Yeah. But I just had to protect those old guys around that table.
And I'm sure they appreciate, I'm sure they were like, we're going to do it for her because she's protecting our thing.
They were the best. They gave me 10, they made everything fly off the page. There's a lot of that is scripted, but you could never tell.
No, it seems so improv. It seems so real. It seems like those guys, and I don't know if they were really friends, but it seems like Carol O'Connor and Robert Loggia were roommates for 40 years.
It was respect. Yeah. It's respect.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference.
Well, I know you got an appointment, so I won't take your whole day. But
I do.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's been great talking to you.
It's been a blast talking to you, someone who's intelligent and kind and full of wit.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. There you go. I mean, Bonnie Hunt, what else can I say? She's incredible. If you have not seen Return to Me, rush right out now or rush right in. I think you can stream it on almost all of the streaming services. It's probably the most easily accessible thing that she's done. And I don't mean sort of emotionally. I mean, just that it's easiest to find as it is on the streaming services. And it is very representative of what she does. And it is a perfect movie. I love that movie. Life with Bonnie, the Bonnie Hunt Show, the Building, everything that she's done I've loved, and I can't wait to see what she does next. When people talk about pioneers in comedy and women in comedy, I don't think she comes up nearly enough. And as we mentioned there, she was the first woman to write and star in her own series. And it's a little bit sad that it took till 1995 for that to happen, but I can't think of a better person to be that first. Again, I'm just blown away. I'm a little bit speechless that I was able to do this. I have some more episodes coming from my trip to LA that are all amazing guests. And again, I thank you for that. I thank you for listening. If you would like to contribute to the Patreon, you don't currently, you can go to patreon.com/TV Guidance Counselor. Of course, you don't have to. I am happy for you just to be listening. If you would like to message me, you can do so at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or at ken@icanread.com. icanread.com, of course, being my stand-up comedy page where you can see all my live dates, including the live TV Guidance Counselor show next week, the 7th, Saturday, April 7th in New York City for New York Podfest, which is a podcast fest, not a pee fest. I'm not going to go down that road. But it's going to be at 6 o'clock. All the details are up on the site. And also, if you follow me on social media or follow the show on social media, it's all up there. We have not done a live show in New York since 4 years ago, which was our very first live show with Amy Sedaris, which was another highlight for me. I put that probably in my top 5 episodes along with this one. But yeah, come out, say hello, and it would be great to see you there. I'm also going to have some exclusive new enamel pins there. I have a tribute to Growing Pains and Just the 10 of Us pin that I am very excited about that you can purchase there. If you can't attend, I will put up whatever's left over on tvguidancecounselor.com and icanread.com, where you can also buy some of our old pins and my albums and all that kind of junk. So tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com, Ken and icanread.com, on Twitter and Instagram at tvguidance, and I am at Kenneth W. Reed. You can go on Facebook if you're not if you haven't deleted it after the subversion of our democracy that they participated in, but I'm not going to get into the details of that. You can just search TV Guidance Counselor on there, and you can send us messages. I love hearing from you guys. If you have any feedback, any other guest suggestions, I'm always open to that. I will do my best to convince the person to be on the show in the nicest way possible. And if you subscribe to the show, that is very welcome as well. And you want to rate and review the show, it is hugely helpful to getting the word out about the show. We'll also be doing a live one for the Women in Comedy Festival, which is later in April. So definitely go on our pages there and I'll give you all the details. In the meantime, Wednesday next week, we'll have a brand new episode. So I'll see you again next time for a brand new episode of TV Guidance Counselor.
You've gone too far now.
I know I have. It's bad now.